Alrighty, guys, we are going to get started. So, for those of you who have joined me before, you know the routine. I have everybody on mute so we don't get distracted from background noise. But if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or you can unmute yourself, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. If you are joining us on Facebook Live, you can enter your comments in the comment area, and I will be watching those and answering. And the same is true for the chat area on Zoom. So let me just adjust my screen so you can see what I'm doing. Perfect. Alrighty. So today we are going to be making some masks. You can see I'm actually wearing a mask around my neck because I'm at work for the first time in a while. We are doing our Zabs Creates from Zab's Place, which is kind of cool. And so we are going to get started doing a DIY, that means a do-it-yourself mask. And we love to upcycle things. So we are actually doing this from a sock. And what's funny about this project is lots of times our washing machine, or maybe it's our dryer, if I knew, probably I'll be rich and famous, something in the laundry process eats our socks. So often you're left with just one sock, which isn't really good for your feet, but it is great for a mask because most of us only have one mouth and we only need to cover one. So you don't need two socks. So that's really cool. The other thing that's interesting about this one is we're actually going to do two different designs. So I'm going to show you two different types of masks that you can make from socks. One you have to be a little careful with because when I tried to do it the first time, I realized that the sock I chose actually had a hole in the heel, which won't work for one of the types of masks, but for the other, it's fine. So it's kind of cool because the two most common places to get holes in socks are in the toes and in the heel. One of these masks is fine if it has a hole in the toe. The other of the masks is fine if it has a hole in the heel. So pretty much whichever place you have a hole, we have at least one mask design that will literally have you covered. So that's good. Now I'm going to go over my supplies. I'm going to show you what I'm using. You might not have these exact supplies where you're doing your craft. That's totally fine. But because I had them available, I figured it's always better to use the right tool. So I'm going to show you what I have. First, I have a pair of socks. This one actually has some fancy things around it. You obviously don't need that. For one of the styles, it won't matter. For the other, hopefully it won't be in the way, but these are the socks that I chose. I also have two pairs of scissors. Now, one of these pairs of scissors looks like a standard pair of scissors, a regular pair of scissors. They're nice and sharp. They're good for cutting fabric. If you're really particular about your scissors and you do a lot of crafting, you have separate scissors for cutting paper and separate scissors for cutting fabric because paper can actually make fabric scissors get not as sharp. So if you just have one pair of scissors at home, you'll be totally fine. You can still use them. I also have another really interesting pair of scissors. Some of you might have never seen these. Some of you might have seen a pair that's actually for paper, but it's the same kind of idea. And if you look, it kind of is like a zigzag, jaggedy pattern. These are called pinking shears. And what they're for is that when you cut fabric, sometimes it will actually make the fabric fray. And what that means is the fabric will want to come undone and start to get all yucky, kind of like the end of a rope that starts to come apart. This type of scissors helps that not happen. So you don't actually have to sew the end of it or put anything special so that it doesn't come apart. So because I have these, I'm actually going to use them. If you don't have them, that's totally fine. You might just notice that on some parts of your mask, you might get little fuzzy things, and that's okay. So those are my scissors, and I have my socks. Those are really the only supplies you need. Now I'm cutting on a glass table, and just to protect it, I have a cutting mat. If you don't have a cutting mat, that's fine, especially if you're cutting with scissors. I also have another really cool tool. I may or may not use it, but I thought it was a great opportunity to show you. This is called a rotary cutter, and it kind of looks like a pizza wheel. So what you do is when you're cutting, you actually just like with the pizza wheel, you mark where you want to cut and then you just roll it. And this is a blade. You have to be very careful, and it will actually cut for you. And so as you roll, it cuts. And what's cool about this, instead of scissors, is that it makes a seamless cut. What that means is you don't see where the scissor was opened and closed. Sometimes when you cut fabric or even paper, you can kind of see where you continued, and it makes a little bit of a jagged edge. With a rotary cutter, it just keeps on going, it keeps on rolling, and so you get a straighter cut. But again, if you don't have one, that's totally fine. The next thing I have is chalk. Also, just an extra, you don't need it, but especially because my socks are black, you'll be able to see where I'm going to cut so that you can get an idea of where you should be cutting. So those are my supplies that I have right now. And I'm going to show you one other pair of socks. These are really patterned and very cool looking, but for one of the types of masks that we're going to do, this would not be a good type because it's very, very tight. And we want something that's a little bit stretchier. So for the type where we're going to be using the heel, this would be okay. For the other type, it's just not very stretchy. So we're going to get started. Any questions so far? All right, we're going to continue then. So I'm going to use my chalk, and I'm going to show you where we are going to cut for the first type of mask. The first type of mask, there we go, you should be able to see. I'll actually put my other sock out of the way so we don't get confused. For the first type of mask that we're using the heel, we're actually going to cut off the toe part. We're not going to worry about the toe. So I'm going to cut that part off, and I'm going to cut about here. Okay? So I just need the heel part. And this is the reason that we want to make sure there's no holes in the heel part, because that would be kind of pointless. So I'm going to show you what it looks like to cut with my pinking shears. Again, if you don't have pinking shears, you can use a regular pair of scissors. So I am going to cut on my lines. So I have my sock laid out with the heel away from me. And I've made two lines, one separating the heel from the toe and the other separating the heel from the top of the sock. If you're using short socks, you might not have a lot to cut, and so you probably shouldn't cut any off if you're using a short pair of socks. If your sock ends here, you don't really need to cut it a little bit lower. Because I'm using a longer sock, that's why I've decided to make a mark. Alrighty. So I am going to cut off my toe area. And I will lift this up so you can see that the pinking shears made kind of a jaggedy edge. And you can still see there are a few little fuzzies, but that's okay. That won't really matter. So that is my first cut. I've cut off the toes. And because I don't like to waste things, this is actually a great thing for dusting. Another great use of this is if you have dining room chairs that scratch your floor, you can actually put these on the feet, and then it will move and it won't scratch your wood floors. So obviously you would need more than one because most chairs have at least 3 legs, but at least you're one closer. So I'm going to put that to the side. Now I'm going to turn my sock back over, and I am going to look at my next line. And again, I'm going to take my pinking shears and I'm going to cut right by that line. It doesn't have to be exact, but it should be close. Now I have what's starting to look like a mask, but it's still not a mask. It really just looks like the heel of a sock. So now we have to open up our mask, or open up our sock, whichever way you look at it. So I'm going to take this part and I'm going to move it to the side. We can maybe even use it for the other type of mask, but for right now, I'm just going to be focused on this one. Now, I'm going to take my chalk and show you what I'm going to do. I'm flipping it over just so you don't get confused with my other chalk lines. And I'm going to color at the top that's opposite my heel. So my heel is at the bottom, and I have a white chalk line at the top. Again, you don't have to use a chalk line. I'm just doing it so you can see. And I'm going to use my pinking shears again. And this time I'm going to cut open the sock. So I'm sticking my scissors in and I'm following that top line. Whoops, lost my mouse. We're back. And I'm going to just cut the sock open. So I now have something that looks a lot more like a mask. I have cut the sock open, and if you can guess, this heel area is now going to be something that can be used to cover my mouth, to cover my nose. Okay, we're almost done. There's only one part that's super important that's left, and that is we have to make some sort of area to put it around our ears or put a string through it or something like that. So I'm going to fold my sock back up, okay? And this way, you actually have to, actually I'll open it up again so you get an idea. We need to make holes on the sides. So if I mark with chalk about where my hole needs to be, when we fold it up, you'll see where that comes out. So we definitely don't want to cut all the way from the top to the bottom because then that fabric would come apart and there would be nothing to loop around our ears. So we do want to make a cut, but we want to make sure that the cut doesn't go all the way to the edge. So that's what we have to be careful of. Now we obviously want, most of us have ears that are about the same size, so we want the holes to be about the same size. So I'm going to fold it back up. You can still see my line. My other line is on the other side. I'm going to fold it again. One side is going to be all my open pieces. The other, where it's folded, is actually closed. And now I'm going to pay really close attention to where I made that chalk line and noticing that it doesn't go all the way to the end. I don't want to cut where there's no chalk line. So for this one, I'm not going to use my, I will use my pinking shears. That way it's even all the way around and it's all the same type of jaggedy. Okay, so I have my scissors ready. I'm not going to put my scissors long enough that it could cut any further than my chalk line, okay? Now, sometimes it's actually hard to cut right at the tip. Give me 1 second, guys. So if you find it hard, you might have to open up your scissors more and put your fabric in deeper into the scissor. Obviously, be careful of your fingers. But when you do that, you just have to be really careful not to cut all the way across because then you lose your ear holes. And we definitely don't want your mask to fall off because then it wouldn't be a mask and that would kind of be silly. So I'm going to show you. I'm putting it a little deeper in and I am watching very carefully to see where my chalk line is. And I'm only going to do about an inch, 3/4 of an inch. So you can see I've cut, but it kind of looks like a monster mouth or something. It's not all the way, okay? And now I'm going to open up my mask. And there you go. We have 2 little holes for our ears. Now, everybody comes with different size ears. So you're gonna have to try it on and make sure your ears fit in the hole. If they don't fit, you might have to adjust it. I have a feeling I'm gonna have to adjust it. So I'm gonna put mine on. But you always want, I hope you can still hear me. You always want to adjust it before, try it on before you cut because it might be perfect. So I'm going to wipe off my chalk line. And there you go. I now have a mask, super comfortable, covers my nose, covers my mouth. It's tight around my chin. And I actually really like it. It's black, so it's a little bit creepy looking, but that's okay. So if you are a glasses wearer, there's one thing that's really cool about this type of mask, and that is it's pretty tight around your nose. And one of the things that if you wear glasses, you might experience that the air comes up out of the top and it fogs your glasses. If you make a mask out of a stretchy sock, or other stretchy material, it will be tighter. It will be tighter, and so no air will get out to fog up your glasses. So that is a definite plus. Now, I will make one little disclaimer. A disclaimer means that I'm going to give you a little warning. The warning is that for masks to be really effective, they need to be strong enough not to let too much air or other stuff out. And a good way to test that is to put your hand in front of your mask. Make sure nobody else is in front of you because that wouldn't be very healthy. And you give a little blow. And if you don't feel anything on your hand, that's awesome. If you do, that's not as awesome. I didn't feel anything, so that is super awesome. So that is very, very exciting. So that is our first style of mask. Hopefully you are still able to hear me. I think I got some black sock dust. That'll go away after you wash it. Hopefully you were able to hear me while I was wearing it. So this is our first style of mask. Now we're going to do our second style, and we are going to actually use the leftover of our first sock. So again, I'm going to show you using my chalk where I'm going to cut. Now this one is a different style mask, and depending on your sock, it's going to come out different sizes. If you use a sock that has ribs, which means it kind of has lines in it, a lot of men's dress socks or sports socks has that kind of pattern. They stretch a little bit more. What's cool about this type of style of mask is that we're going to leave a little pocket. So if you use a sock that's a little bit thinner and you want to put something in between to make a filter, you'll be able to in this type of mask. So hopefully your sock doesn't have rhinestones, because for this style, it might be a little bit strange, but we're going to go with it because why not? So we'll add a little bling to our sock. So here is our tube, because it's basically part of a tube sock. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to mark with my chalk. And I'm marking about maybe, well, I actually have a measuring device here. It's probably about a ½ an inch from the end. You don't want to make it too close to the edge. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm making my line almost all the way to the end. Give me a second. Yeah, okay. Had to remember. So let me turn it so you can see. There we go. Here you see my 2 marks. Now, just to give you an idea, where the marks are is where we're going to cut, okay? Now, if you can imagine, and of course, we'll do it together in a minute, but I will show you, and actually, give me one more second. I'm gonna make my chalk line on both sides so it's easier to see, and we don't have to imagine as much. So, all right. So I have made my chalk line on both sides. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate my sock. And the part that doesn't have chalk on it is not going to get cut. Okay? Now what's going to happen is we're going to make it so that the ear flaps, ear strings, I don't know what they're called. The part that goes around your ear is going to be from the back part of the fabric, and we're going to leave this part whole. And it's going to cover like that. Okay? So I am going to go ahead and cut mine so you can see. For this one, I'm going to show you how the rotary cutter works, just in case you wanted to see it. But again, of course, you could use regular scissors, or if you were using pinking shears, you can use those too. So it's always a good idea to cut away from you. You never want to roll a knife or anything towards you. That would be dangerous. So I'm putting the sock so the chalk line is towards me, and I'm going to roll away from me towards where the end of the chalk line is. So Just like with a pizza cutter, you gently go back and forth. And there you go. It is a very, what we call clean line. It's totally straight. There's no fuzzies. And that's really cool. And now I'm going to do the other side. I turned it so that the chalk line is near me and the other part is away from me. This one has kind of an interesting edge, so we'll see how that one comes out. Making sure to keep my fingers far away from the blade because I definitely don't want to get any cuts. And here we go. I have cut two little, it almost looks like arms of a wide sweater, but that's not what it is. Now we're going to rotate it. And I will put it up against my face and adjust these little strappy things around my ears. Now this one is not as tight, but it does leave a little pocket. Let's see if you can see my pocket. It does leave a pocket to put something inside. So I'm going to show you. It's a little harder to hear also because it's two thicknesses of sock. So I am going to put a little piece of paper. Pretend this is my filter just so you guys can see. What I will do is I will slide it into the sock. Now, obviously, this is a terrible filter. Do not use this as a filter because that would be very silly. But this is what I have nearby. And you can see it's sticking through. And the cool thing is you don't really see the filter. So that way, when you wear this, you don't see a bunch of people's filters and people won't see your filter. And my bling is kind of cool. So those are the two styles of sock masks. And definitely, if I had to give a review, if somebody wanted my opinion on which is the better one to make, I would say that if you're really keen on having a filter, if you think that's really important, this is the one to make, but it's a little harder to hear through because it's more thicknesses of fabric. It's also not as tight a fit. So maybe if you have a little bit of a bigger face, or you might, maybe you need to stretch your sock, this one is a better one to go with. I personally like a nice tight mask, and so I actually prefer the heel type. So that's it. Any questions? If you have questions, you can unmute yourself or you can raise your hand and I will be happy to answer them. I would love to see pictures of your masks, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a very healthy mask wearing experience over the next however long we have to wear them for. Eric, did you have a question?
Yeah, quick question.
Yeah.
How can you combine like two small socks and make like I have like right here, I have two small socks.
Pull your sock away from the screen so I can see a little better. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm just going to